Audrey Hepburn is an actress of elegance and grace. Hepburn became one of the leading stars of the 1950s and 60s through her roles in such films as Roman Holiday, Funny Face, The Nun Story, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Charade, My Fair Lady, and Wait Until Dark. She hasn't made a film since 1980 when she appeared in Peter Bogdanovich's They All Laughed. Last month, the British-born actress accepted a position outside the film world. She's serving as a special ambassador of UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. Her first assignment was a trip last month to Ethiopia. She took a 3-day tour of the UNICEF relief and development projects in the drought-stricken areas of Ethiopia. I just spoke with her from the NPR bureau in Los Angeles about her work with UNICEF and about her film career. She told me first what she observed in her trip to Ethiopia.
The situation is potentially much worse than in 85. There's been even less rain, and the rains that were supposed to fall now in April have failed again. And therefore the drought is worse, and the famine could get very, very serious. This time we had an early warning, so aid started earlier. Therefore we've not had the terrible tragedies like the last time of people dying by the hundreds before aid ever reached them. Nevertheless, the people are very undernourished, and especially the children. The children are getting some powdered milk and grain and so forth, but they're not getting anywhere near enough supplementary foods like proteins and vitamins, and many of them have eye diseases and skin diseases through lack of vitamins and are going blind.
Since you returned from Ethiopia, there's been a government order expelling all foreign relief workers and closing down UN relief efforts. Now, how is that affecting the programs that you're working on?
Well, they have indeed evacuated all expatriates, if you like, from the area for their safety, because the war has accelerated, as you just said, in the last few days, and the situation is becoming very serious. All international agencies have been evacuated except UNICEF. UNICEF is still there, and the food is still being distributed by the Ethiopian Red Cross and the Ethiopian Church, and all these activities are being monitored by UNICEF.
Do you know why an exception was made for UNICEF when all the other relief workers were expelled?
Well, UNICEF is really totally non-political and humanitarian, and has proven that over and over again. And even if they were to evacuate the few UNICEF officials that are in that area, you cannot expel UNICEF. UNICEF has been there for 50 years, has helped dig wells, create agricultural centers, given them schools, given them weaving equipment, bought them sheep and cattle and so forth. UNICEF has been working very hard at giving them long-term aid, as we call it. And by that we don't mean that the aid has to go on forever, but that the results are long-term.
What are UNICEF's current concerns about how the escalation in the war is going to affect their relief efforts?
We're deeply concerned because, as it is, for instance, in the north, the capital of Eritrea is Asmara, which is a city of about 500,000 people. And already in the last few days, about 5,000 refugees have arrived. Asmara is without water. They have no water there. There was the minimum when I was there 2 or 3 weeks ago. People were getting like a quart of water per day for a whole family. I mean, that's just enough to survive on. And there are whole areas where people cannot be reached either by road or by plane. And it doesn't bear thinking of what will happen to them.
When you were in Ethiopia, were you able to see the results of the years of relief and famine aid efforts that have been going on?
Oh, yes. That's just what I was telling you about. They have created all over Ethiopia these agricultural communes, these food-for-work projects, as they call it. They feed the people, and in return, they work their land. They have, wherever they could, created a water system, whether it's a well or by capping springs or boring holes, and around this water there is once again life, because they've been able to plant trees. They've been given seeds to sow, which they didn't have anymore because they ate them in the last famine. They've been given oxen to till their land. They had no cattle anymore because they died in the drought. They've been given sheep and chicken and so forth. And these are highly successful. And these projects have been the only areas where, even this time, they have not needed aid.
Audrey Hepburn is my guest, and she's now a special ambassador for UNICEF, and she recently returned from a trip to Ethiopia. What did you see in Ethiopia that had the biggest effect on you?
The people as a whole, because obviously I was prepared for seeing hunger, seeing the distribution centers. I was expecting to fly on Hercules planes and many things I knew about. What I'd never realized is what an extraordinary people the Ethiopians are. They're very, very beautiful, very proud, have enormous dignity, very patient, very gentle, very hard-working. They're easy to communicate with because they, although I don't know the language, they smile, they touch, but they're so extraordinarily silent. It's strange. Also the children. I visited, for instance, a distribution center with a good 2,000 people sitting around in the sand just waiting for their rations, and there was almost not a murmur. Obviously children don't run around because they're too weak and don't have the energy that our children would have and be able to be nice and noisy. But the people themselves too have such a serenity about them. And I had a long talk with an Ethiopian lady who fortunately spoke English and asked her about this phenomena. She said, I think it has a lot to do with our religion. They're extremely religious. Most of the country, as you may know, is Christian, and Christianity has been in Ethiopia since the 4th century. It actually is the cradle of humanity is in Ethiopia. It's a very old country with a very old culture. And this is what this, I mean, I just gasped constantly at the people and the beauty of the women and their manner.
You're best known as an actress. Did you approach UNICEF or did they approach you to become a special ambassador?
It just happened. I've known UNICEF all my life, as many of us have, and I have off and on been asked to raise funds in some small way, or attend a gala, or sell Christmas cards. So last year I went to Tokyo for them for a gala UNICEF concert and so forth. And this year, I mean, I had the great privilege of being asked to go on a mission for them, and this has made me extremely happy and a much happier person than I was, because I felt very frustrated at not being able to do anything. I mean, we've all seen the pictures of 85, and we see so much misery around us in our own countries and so forth, and it's a marvelous relief, however little, but to do something.
I know that during the Second World War you had your mother had sent you to Holland in the hopes that you'd be...
I was living in Holland. My mother was living there with both my brothers, yes.
I see, and that was in the hopes of being away from the Nazis, but of course the Nazis invaded after you moved
there.
Yes,
well, Holland had always been neutral, and my mother is Dutch, and I have a whole Dutch family there.
I see.
And that's where we were living. And, we thought it was a good place to be because Holland had always been neutral, but after a very short while we were invaded by the Germans, and the rest is history.
Now, the way I understand it, you had been the recipient of relief after the war.
Right, because especially the last winter was dramatic, especially where we were living, because our house was between the lines. The British had landed, had their airborne landing in Arnhem. You're too young to know about that, but maybe you've read about it. And that was one of the bloodiest battles of the war, which failed, and they withdrew to the other side of the river. And we were in the area right there, next to Arnhem, with the Germans behind us and the British on the other side of the river. And it became a no-man's land for the civilians. We were not allowed to leave because nobody wanted a lot of refugees taken to the roads, and we had nowhere to go anyway. And but no provisions were made. So we really lived from hand to mouth and exchanged whatever we had for a few turnips or whatever it was. And the last winter was really very serious. And as I've just told you now about Ethiopia too, although my case can in no way be compared to the children of Ethiopia, it's the children, the growing children that show the first signs of malnutrition, which I did have when the war ended. But UNICEF and the Red Cross came in instantly after the liberation with their trucks and filled the local churches and schools with medications and blankets and food. And I was one of the very lucky recipients.
You've never been a very public person, even as an actress. I think you've really avoided a lot of publicity.
How right you are.
I'll tell you the truth. I was almost surprised when I heard that you were a special ambassador for UNICEF, because it meant being in the spokesperson position, and it's a position you'd avoided for so long.
Yes, but you see, one of the reasons that I never enjoyed doing publicity very much is that I found it very boring to talk about myself over and over again, apart from the fact that I wanted to protect my private life. Whereas now there's something I do want to talk about, and I welcome the opportunity to.
So it's a way of in a way using the attention that you would naturally get and using that for a cause that you believe in.
That's exactly right, yes.
Would you mind terribly if I asked you a few questions about yourself?
No, please.
Are you retired from movies? Do you think of yourself as being retired from films?
I tell you, I withdrew. I've never, because when you say you've retired, that means you'll never ever work again, and you're sort of, retired with a capital R. I've never done that. It's sort of ironic because I started to withdraw from movies when my eldest son started going to school, because I suffered so from being away from him, and I'd wanted to have him so much that I just decided that was too great a sacrifice, so I stayed home with him. And over the years, I've done an occasional picture during the holidays, and then I had a second son, and so that was the same story. So first, I really stayed home on account of my children, and now I'm flying around the world because of children. So it's a switch.
The Academy Awards were your first public appearance in the film world like that in a long time. Did you have to be talked into it?
No, not at all. But that I've done quite frequently.
Oh,
okay.
I mean,
I presented an award 2 years ago, the awards before last.
Well, you co-presented this year with Gregory Peck, and you co-starred with him in your first big film, Roman Holiday.
That's right.
Now, he was already a big star, and you were a newcomer then.
He sure was.
Was it intimidating to work opposite him so early on in your career?
No, it was. I mean, I was so starstruck and so impressed at even meeting this wonderful man, And he turned out to be just the way I thought he would be. A sweet, kind, lovely man, and who gave me an extraordinary example of what it is to be a professional.
William Wyler was the director. Did he cast you for the film?
Yes. Yes, he tested many girls, and then I got the part, which was extraordinary, and also thanks to Greg, because he had co-partner approval, or whatever you want to call it.
I'm thinking that when you started making movies in the 50s, that the really fashionable female figure at the time was the full-bodied hourglass figure, very bosomy, big hips. and you are and were such a thin woman, and really set a new kind of style in a way because of your build. But were you self-conscious about being that thin at the time, knowing that
sure.
it was the buxomy woman that was in?
I grew up full of complexes. I was, I realized what one was supposed to look like, and here I was, rather thin, as you say, and flat-chested and lanky and so forth. But apparently William Wyler didn't mind, and so, today I can live with it very happily.
Well, think of how many women would love to be you or look like you. Did you go through a period of trying to gain weight?
No, I've never been able to. The only time I ever sort of put on some weight or got a little bit tubby was right after the war, when the first food started coming in, and we'd get care packages with jars of jam and condensed milk, and I'd just eat the whole thing. eat the whole jam jar and, with a spoon and the condensed milk too, and then obviously be very ill after it. But I put a bit of weight on, and I must have been 10 pounds heavier than I am today.
My guest is actress Audrey Hepburn. She's currently a special ambassador for UNICEF. More after this short break. This is Fresh Air.
Fresh Air is produced live from WHYY in Philadelphia and is distributed by National Public Radio.
Audrey Hepburn is my guest. You had been a ballet dancer when you were young before you took to acting. When you danced with Fred Astaire in Funny Face, did you feel like you learned something from dancing with him?
Oh, that's the understatement of the year, because obviously I couldn't learn from Fred Astaire because I could never learn what he can do. But I had the great thrill of dancing with him and enjoyed the sort of what's the word for it? Almost the ecstasy of being sort of swept off the floor, He was so light on his feet, and he made you look so much better, and he made you dance better than you could. And it was a divine experience. Fred was a very sweet man, and we had a lot of fun together. And it was one of the better experiences of my life.
I loved your performance in the movie The Nun Story. And I think of that as being a very different kind of role for you. In so many of your movies, you were really beautifully dressed, and many of your movies were comedies. And in The Nun Story, it's a dramatic film, and you're covered with a habit during most of the movie. Was that a role you were anxious to get?
Oh yes, I was terribly happy to do that. And there again, I worked with a great director, Fred Zinnemann. And he's a very thorough man of great integrity, and he put me through months of preparation for that picture.
What kind of preparation?
Oh, but he put me in a convent for 2 days and
really?
nights, and took me to see one operation after the other in hospitals, and really. It was an indoctrination, but I appreciated that. I mean, it was part of a marvelous experience, and also being in Africa for the first time. That was a very different kind of Africa to Ethiopia. The Congo, what was then the Congo and is now Zaire, is a very, very lush, very green, jungle-like country. But that was a very deep, very emotional experience, that picture, especially as I knew and became close friends with Lou Abetz, whom the book was about. She was Sister Luke. And I actually became very close to her because we met before the picture, and I was able to talk to her a little bit about her life, which she was very generous and very free in discussing. But a rather wonderful thing happened. Was that I was making a Western in Mexico for John Huston, and broke my back falling off a horse.
Mm.
And I was x-rayed down there, and I'd broken 4 vertebrae, and the picture was only halfway through. And I was flown back to Los Angeles to be x-rayed here again, and so forth. And the diagnosis was correct. And I was put flat on my back for 5 weeks. But before I ever left Mexico, I got a phone call from Lou, who was then a registered nurse in Los Angeles. She was working as a nurse. And she says, "Audrey, I just heard something on the radio. Is it true? I can never believe what I hear." And I said, "Yes, Lou, I'm flat on my back, and I'm coming back tomorrow." And she said, "Well, I'll come and nurse you. I'll come and take care of you." So when I got home and had to lie flat on my back for 5 weeks, Lou Abetz nursed me, Sister Luke.
That's great.
And we had a lot of laughs. She was a fabulous nurse, but she was such great company.
Did she like the movie?
Did she like the movie? Yes, she was very happy with it, yes.
You were wonderful in Charade opposite Cary Grant. And I think one of the greatest things about acting opposite him is probably his sense of timing when he does his lines.
Oh, brilliant.
It must be great to work off of someone like
yes.
that.
Oh, sure. I mean, and that's what I was saying before, that it was true also of Rex Harrison and all these marvelous stars that I was lucky enough to play opposite. It's, it's like, I don't know, playing tennis. Even if you are not very good, but if you play with a really good player, it improves your game. And it's hard to miss when you're working with people like that.
How much did you rehearse your lines with Cary Grant? Did you try to do them a lot to get the timing down, or was it more on the spontaneity of it?
You know, timing you can't rehearse. It's an instinct, especially comedy. I mean, that's what made Cary unique. That's why there haven't been a whole lot of Cary Grants. It was part of him. It was his genius, if you like. And you can rehearse a scene, like which door you're going to come in and which chair you're going to sit down on and where you're going to speak and so forth. But you can't rehearse that kind of thing. It has to come from within, like all acting, whether it's comedy or whether it's emotional.
Now, you starred in the film version of My Fair Lady. The singing was dubbed by Marni Nixon.
Right.
Did you know that was going to happen when you made the film?
Oh, yes. But I mean, nevertheless, I worked very hard on my singing, because actually what they did was, as Marni Nixon I had to sing to her soundtrack, if you like. At the same time, she also had to match me. And we both recorded the songs. Me, the best I could, and she with her lovely voice. But also, the men in the mixing rooms are so brilliant, because in many cases, in several of the songs, the start of a phrase would be my voice, and they would have just blend into hers. She sang all the difficult parts, and I was able to do a few phrases that were within my reach. And that's why it all matches so well.
Oh, so you really both sang the songs, literally?
Yes, but I mean, I sang a bit of the easier songs. She sang nearly all of the difficult ones. But nevertheless, they started by coming out of my mouth. Do you know what I'm
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
When you withdrew from movies, did you feel that there was an Audrey Hepburn type that you had established, and that there was somebody else who was waiting in the wings to be the next Audrey Hepburn?
No. I've never been. That would be a little complicated, and I think I'm not that at all about myself. I've just been me all my life, and I've been terribly fortunate to have this career and become an actress just by chance, really. I mean, as we said earlier, I trained as a dancer, and that's what I thought I was going to be. But I don't have an image of myself at all.
But the movie industry had an image of you, though.
It's in the public's eye. It's very hard. I mean, you look at yourself in the mirror, but that's not what other people see, whether it's you or whether it's me, And we're very critical about ourselves. And fortunately, people who like you or love you are not as critical. Otherwise, we'd have no audience.
Just one more thing about movies I wanted to ask you. In several of your films, you've played women who are either very sophisticated, or in one movie, even a princess. Now, you grew up the daughter of a baroness. Did you, kind of get taught in a way how to be elegant when you were young?
That's a very sweet question. As you say, being the daughter of a baroness doesn't make you any different, except that my mother was born in 1900 and had herself a very strict and Victorian upbringing, if you like. So she was very demanding of us, of me and my brothers, and manners, as she always said, don't forget, are kindnesses. You must always be kind. Opening the door for an old lady isn't just a routine. It's so that, she's helped. And she was always very adamant about that.
But even your posture and your carriage have always been so perfect.
Well, that has, if that is so, and I'm glad to hear you think so, that has to do with ballet training, though.
Mm-hmm.
A straight back and My mother probably had me sleep without a pillow. Or
Oh, really? Is that supposed to be good for neck
Oh, yeah.
posture or something?
Babies shouldn't have pillows. Or if they have one, very, very flat ones.
Well, speaking of necks, gosh, you have such a gorgeous neck. Were you aware of that when you were growing up? Was that something you were
No,
proud of, or?
I tell you, no, I'm a much happier person about myself today than I was then. I always thought, that I'd never get off the shelf. I didn't think I looked right at all. And today, many movies later, and 2 sons, and lots of friends, and I may have a few wrinkles, but I'm much happier.
Now that you're working for UNICEF as a special ambassador, are you feeling that somehow the movies that you gave us aren't enough, that you want to do something that is more humanistic, more socially conscious?
No, one has nothing to do with the other. I mean, movies have been my working life. I've always had a life of my own, a private life, and I've always had very deep feelings about my children, about other people's children, about, I dare say, about other people's suffering. And this is just an extraordinary opportunity that's been given me to be allowed to do something finally. One tries to do it near to home, or if you hear of somebody who's in need, or wherever one can. But it's such a relief to me to be able to do something about these children.
For Americans who want to do something, what kind of action would you suggest?
Oh, that would be wonderful. First, let me say that Americans are so generous, and we are all so grateful. But we do need more help now, and if they want to help, please have them call the number which I will give you, which is 1-800-4KIDS.
That's FORKIDS.
That's right. And that every little bit helps, and they really, believe me, need it.
Audrey Hepburn, I thank you very much for the time you spent with us. Thank you very much.
I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
My guest has been actress Audrey Hepburn, who's now working as a special ambassador for UNICEF.